Anyway, Dave, shall we move on to our main topic?
Yes, we should, because I've got lots to say.
Very good. Well, as I said at the start of the episode, you good folks out there voted for Series 10 of Doctor Who, Peter Capaldi's final series, and I don't think either of us were too put out by having to do this, Dave.
No, it's interesting. I was obviously sitting around the table here at my place when Mark said, I nominate Series 10, and my initial thought was, oh, come on, Mark. It was only a couple of years ago. We just did a hot take on those ones. And then it sunk in very, very slowly that was 7 years ago.
Yes, it was.
And it is absolutely time to go back and do a proper rewatch of that series. So, no, thank you, Mark. I was a bit surprised at just how long ago Capaldi was, because he's only one Doctor ago.
Yeah.
He's only one era
essentially.
ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of our listeners tweeted us recently that they were listening to those Season 10 shows that you're referring to. And I said, oh, well, that's very interesting. But as I said to them, it's not something I was going to do and potentially get influenced by in this episode, even from a scoring point of view. So aside from a few episodes tonight that I have rewatched over the years, I mean, hello, World Enough and Time, most of these views are the first time I've watched the episodes since they went out back in 2017 and we recorded those episodes. Basically, I would have watched them once, sometimes twice on the day of release, and that was due to my wife also watching them at the time. But this is the era where she sort of dropped out of Doctor Who, so I didn't even watch all of these twice. I know that for sure. This is going to be a completely fresh set of reviews for me here, what we're doing tonight.
No, absolutely. I certainly haven't gone back and listened to what we said. There are occasions, though, where I was trying to frame a thought or put a point down in my head to talk about, and I suddenly thought, I think I said that last time too. But there's other times where stuff is completely almost new and fresh, and there are some that were better than I expected and some that were not as good as I expected.
Well, shall we rip into them?
We shall. Who do you want us to kick off, Rob?
I'll take lead, Dave.
Sure.
With the pilot. This seemed very clever to me when I rewatched it, even though I could see all the gears and the cogs moving behind the scenes. It introduces Bill, of course, in a way that's really relatable and very human. I could imagine, I thought this while I was watching, I could imagine showing this to a non-Doctor Who person, say my work bestie, and imagine her just laughing at a lot of Bill's lines and saying, I'd say that, because Bill feels very natural. She feels very real. Of course, it also introduces the Heather character who's going to swing back at the end of the season to save Bill. And although the monster of the piece is a puddle of space oil who isn't actually evil, doing anything particularly interesting except following the directions of Heather's last thought, it does engineer scenarios where Bill can go in the TARDIS and have a short trip. She can go back into the TARDIS and have a trip to Australia. She can go back into the TARDIS and have another trip around the world. Then go back into the TARDIS and end up in the Dalek-Movellan War. And in the space of 10-15 minutes in this episode, Dave, Bill has had the companion experiences that might take 3 or 4 episodes for another companion to have. And I thought, that's bloody clever. Good on you, Moffat. Capaldi's also on song. The whole thing's fun, and it was probably about an 8 out of 10 for me on this rewatch.
I put this on with a little bit of trepidation because, as I said, it does feel like we've been here fairly recently, even though the memory cheats and we actually hadn't. And there's also that sense of, okay, February's an incredibly short month. I've just realised I've got about 12 days to watch the entire 10 episodes, or 12 episodes, I should say, of this series. So there was a little bit of like, okay, this is going to be, maybe this is going to be a bit of a slog. Okay. I am so happy I'm a Doctor Who fan, Rob, because within 5 minutes of starting this, I was just grinning from ear to ear and having an absolute whale of a time. And a big reason for that, and I'm going to be coming back to this, I suspect, quite a bit over the next 45 minutes or so, is Peter Capaldi. The way that he was interacting with Bill, the way that he was doing the lectures, the way that he was setting things up, he was just so fun to watch. He's such a good actor. He's an incredible doctor. And that first 5 minutes, I was just going, this is awesome. I love watching Peter Capaldi and I love watching Bill Potts. I'm so glad that I'm doing that again. Most of that enthusiasm continued for the episode. I did think it was too long. It's back in those days where they felt they had to have a big, extra long season opener. I'm like, this doesn't need to be an hour. This can be 40 minutes. And some of it was a little bit too long. But I thought the mystery works well. The way they explain what's happening works well. The Dark Magellan War that they sort of pop into is a really cool idea. Interestingly, watching it for the second time, it wasn't nearly that, oh my God, what's going on? Oh my God, it's a Magellan. There was that sort of thing that we had the first time. When you know it's coming, like, oh yeah, that's cool, there's Magellans. But look, it was enjoyable, a little bit long, a little bit simple, but a really good opener. I agree, Rob. It's something that a non-Doctor Who fan could watch and go, yeah, this is kind of fun, this is kind of cool, and get a lot out of it. I gave it a B+.
Nice. Why don't you keep us going with Smile?
So I remember Smile as being really good, and I've spent a lot of the last 7 years, I feel, talking up Smile because a lot of fans don't think a lot of it. And I'm standing by that take. I watched the opening of this, and my first thought was, I don't remember getting into the murdering and the slaughter like seconds into it. This is, wow, okay, this is not what I remember. I thought the Doctor discovered it all slowly, but no, it's set up like these robots are slaughtering people, okay.
Yeah.
And from there, it's really good. It looks beautiful. Some of the acting's not the best. Some of the plot isn't that great, but there's a real sense of adventure and excitement and a bit of chilling stuff in there. The bones that they find, what's happened to people and they like to talk about grief. I think the robot design is good, and it is creepy when they turn, well, not evil, but so to speak. But definitely we have got two in a row of it's not evil, just misunderstood. And watching them back to back, that did stand out. Not quite as good as the pilot. I'm going a B.
Okay. My take on Smile is that this one surprised me, as I remembered the key bits, that there were emoji bots and you have to smile or be killed, and I knew it was filmed at a really cool looking building. I think it's in Spain. So the production looked really good. I remembered all of that. But how they got out of specific scrapes, or how out of nowhere it turns into an indigenous peoples and paying rent for coming to their land allegory in the last few minutes of the piece, I'd completely forgotten all of that.
Me too. Absolutely, me too.
And look, I think broadly it holds up, and there's that feeling of weirdness and tension. I think you've touched on it there, and it feels quite sci-fi, and I really like that. I think it falls down a little when the colonists start appearing and we're worried about the young boy, and of course there's a young boy, and the leader of the colonists turns out to be a dick. Yes. Of course he turns out to be a dick, you know.
Yeah.
And things get chaotic in general, and suddenly we have a bunch more people in the mix in the middle of the chaos. I wouldn't say it bombs the landing, but it just felt slightly off to me the longer it went on. And like you, I don't think it's as good as the pilot, but it's not bad, and I went with a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I was thinking if this was a sci-fi novel, this would be awesome.
Yeah.
And it still looks great on television, but you're right, some of the need to have actors and performances doesn't quite land as well as it might have if this was a novel, but the concept's great. No, a good episode.
I'll keep us going with Thin Ice. I had memories of this one being a bit boring, but I put it on with a genuinely open mind. I mean, it's been 7 years. And it doesn't completely fall over. I mean, it does wear its agenda on its sleeve a bit at times, and it's even misleading as it tries to hammer home its topics, which was a bit distracting to me. For example, Bill becomes quite fearful that it's 1814 and she's black, and quotation marks, slavery is still a thing, which the Doctor confirms. What's not said, however, is that slavery never had any legal basis in England at all, and the slave trade itself had been abolished 7 years earlier in the UK. So a line from the Doctor along the lines of, yes, it's sadly a thing out there in the big wide world, but you're safe here, I think would have made more sense than letting Bill be fearful for herself in the middle of London in 1814. And I do think viewers could be very misled here if they don't know the history going on behind all this. Similarly, the villain of the piece, Sutcliffe, is painted into such a panto-villain corner. He comes across as less a realistic person and more what a 21st century writer needs their punching bag to look like. So, overall, it's a basic runaround. I did have issues with the agenda in places and the way it was presented, probably the way it's presented more than anything. And I don't think it's anything too special. I gave this a 6.
I've given Thin Ice a B as well, so the same as Smile.
Okay.
But what's interesting is that whilst I remembered most of the main plot, there's a sea creature under the ice and there's a cipher of a bad dude who's doing bad dude stuff with it, and he's a capitalist, so and all of that. So I can remember that, and that was the weakest stuff of the episode. But what I'd completely forgotten is all of the stuff that goes in between that. And there's all the different plot lines with the kids, with other people that they meet. There's the stuff with that urchin is just dragged under the ice and killed in about 5 minutes. I forgot that. That's a bit... Oh, my goodness.
Well, that's what he gets for stealing the Sonic, Dave.
Well, yeah, apparently. Oliver Twist was sort of killed in the first 5 minutes, which was interesting. But then all that stuff that fitting in between the cliched villain, I thought was the highlight of the episode. I thought it was really well done. It gave Capaldi a chance to shine as well, and to do that thing that Capaldi does really well with kids. He's just really good with kids, both in real life and as an actor and as a doctor. And I thought that was what held this episode up for me. The cliched stuff, if that was alone, this would have dropped down. But with all the other good stuff and the character and the Capaldi, and indeed Pearl Mackie's performance, I'm sticking to a B.
Okay, very good. Keep us going with Knock Knock.
So I have also spent the last 7 years, I feel, defending Knock Knock as a really good story against a fandom that's not quite as in love with it as I was.
Oh, really?
And I might have been a little bit wrong, Rob. It's okay. I enjoyed watching it. Again, the Doctor and Bill are by far the best stuff in this, and my favourite scenes were the stuff with the Doctor hanging around with the kids and him just being, that really cool grandpa that they're like, actually, this dude's kind of fun. Let's hang with him, and him sort of having fun. And I love that knowing sort of alienness of the 12th Doctor compared to the 11th Doctor. I don't know what football is. Oh, what's a girl? Ooh, I so much enjoyed the knowing alienness of Capaldi than I do the just twattiness of Smith. So I love that sort of stuff in there. I didn't think the plot was up to much, and so it was weaker than I remembered. The resolution wasn't particularly great. I will say, though, and it's important to note this, I suspect that I'm going to be more down on this now than I was during our hot take, because in our hot take I would have watched the first 4 episodes over 4 weeks. In this case, I've watched 4 episodes over probably 3, maybe 4 days. And so the 4th iteration of it's not really evil, just misunderstood, whether that's the fish or the robots or the puddle or now the earwigs, the 4th iteration of that, I was just like, oh, come on. Give us something nasty. Give us something bad. Some misunderstood witchetty grubs is not exciting. So, look, there was a lot to enjoy. Capaldi carried it, but it is one that has dropped a bit in my memory. I've gone down to a B-.
This is really interesting, Dave.
Okay.
Because in my memory, this is the one where I liked the setup, but I felt it failed the landing. But on rewatch, I liked about 99% of this, Dave.
Okay.
Even when we got to the wooden woman and all of that at the end, I was invested. I bought into it. I liked it, frankly. But you know what still got me? You know what that 1% was?
Go on.
The happy everyone lives style ending. And I'm sorry, if you've been filleted at a cellular level and fed as energy to a wooden woman, you aren't coming back. Let's just say that. I get that makes for a messy time for Bill if all her uni mates suddenly go missing and she doesn't, but that's life, We've had a horrific time, horrific things happened. Let's have that stick. So that's my only real gripe with this. I was enjoying it otherwise. I think David Suchet is fabulous in this. I think, again, like you say, the Doctor hanging out with the kids is brilliant. It was the first episode in this series where I felt on this rewatch I was having a reasonably different reaction to what my memory was. And for that alone, I was glad we were doing the rewatch. My sense is that this wasn't particularly liked by fandom. I don't know if I'm just catching up or where I'm at, but I'm giving this an 8 out of 10, Dave.
No, that's very cool. I'm glad you've enjoyed it more, and even if I've enjoyed it less. I'm glad you mentioned the Wooden Woman, because I've got to say, look, we don't watch Doctor Who for the effects, but when she came on screen, there was just I just sat there, I think I said out loud, oh, come on, that looks terrible.
Yeah. Shall I continue on with Oxygen?
Yeah, go for it.
This one, Dave, I don't think is a million miles away from Smile in some ways. We have a really good, dark sci-fi tale going on. There's lots of people being bumped off by technology and things look really bleak for our heroes. It's ticking all the boxes to be a very good story. And then at the last minute, it shoehorns in this message that doesn't feel quite natural. Sure, it's more natural than Smile, where out of left field some nanobots gain sentience and are declared the indigenous race of the planet, even though they aren't from the planet. But only just. We get the feeling throughout the episode that the corporation are bastards. But to go this extra leap, that if you don't work hard enough, even for a short period of time, that they'll actually kill you, it just doesn't scan for me. It makes that big, as you would say, undergraduate point of corporations. They're out to get you and all of that. But in universe, how would this be explained? Because presumably it would happen a lot. You know, people bunk off work from time to time, they get killed. Wouldn't this company have a reputation for loads of dead employees? Is it even cost effective to keep retraining new people? So a really good story, but I felt it fell down a bit at the end and it dropped it down, because initially I was thinking, oh, this is going to be quite high. It dropped it down to an 8 out of 10 for me. Otherwise, I really liked it.
This is, I think, comfortably the episode of this series that went down the furthest for me on this watch. I actually got very little out of this at all. I get the feeling that they said, right, we've got a really cool scene where there was a spacewalk, and yep, that scene was very cool. And they said, oh, we've got this really cool twist at the end where it's the corporation all the time. And the other 37 minutes was just nothing, absolutely nothing. It really felt like they had a punchline and then just tried to write an episode to get there via a cool spacewalk. And I didn't get anything out of this much at all. Look, it looks good. I guess there's an okay sci-fi idea in there with we have a certain number of breaths, so we get an oxygen ration or whatever it is. But mostly I just sort of thought it was an idea looking for a plot, and it didn't find a plot, and so I was left there with a C.
Yeah, I guess for me it ties into some of the Warhammer 40k sort of horror-tinged stuff, creeping around a spaceship with sort of space zombies coming after you. It quite appealed to me visually, especially. But anyway, we should move on. Extremis, Dave.
So I'm going to talk about Extremis and also riff a little bit on the Pyramid at the End of the World. Okay. Because the big takeaway I got from both of those episodes was that they are better than I remembered, but they both are insubstantial. But I thought they both had a really cool sci-fi idea at their premise. And I thought if this had been one episode where you've got the cool idea of each competing with each other, that would work really, really well. I think these would be judged much better. They just lack enough for a two-parter. Never mind a three-parter. I'll deal separately with The Lie of the Land. Extremis particularly, I really hated this when it came out. And actually, I didn't review these 3 episodes on The Hot Take. I was in America at that time, desperately trying to watch them on sort of 7 years ago Wi-Fi in America, which wasn't great.
Right.
So I didn't remember to do the hot takes on these at the time. I didn't like Extremis at the time, but again, I've watched it this time. I think the ideas are really good. There's some good performance. I think you can lose all the nonsense with the Pope, and this episode would lose nothing. I get that they need to sort of have the Vatican there to do the deep, dark secrets, and Vatican sort of just says quickly, deep, dark secret. So I get that, but all that mess around with the Pope and everything, cut that away, get this down to 25 minutes, and then get into Pyramid as the back half would work really well. As I say, I really disliked this when I watched it 7 years ago. I'm moving it up to a C+, which is not great. It's not a great episode, but it's a good middle-of-the-road episode, not the stinker I expected.
Alrighty then. For me, for the start of a 3-parter, I felt this one oozed confidence back then, and I still think it lands now. It's funny, I think the premise of the Pope turning up is really funny. And I really enjoy that bit, particularly as they got such a dead ringer for the Pope too. It's quite funny. And the idea that if you read the Veritas, you go mad and you kill yourself, that's quite spooky. And of course, all of this is being intercut with the Missy backstory of how she ended up in the vault, which is something that, you know, we haven't been talking about, the vault is in all these earlier episodes, who's in the vault, what's happening. Her execution, or what's going to be her execution, and the lines that are going to come back at the end of the series, you know, without hope, without witness, without reward, they just seem like cool lines in this episode, but they have a deeper meaning when we get to the end of the series. I was noticing all of that, obviously, on the second time around, because I've obviously seen the end of the series now. We have confirmation that River Song is finally dead at this point in Capaldi's timeline. And then the revelation that it's all a simulation, and even as a simulation, the Doctor's a brave, daring kind of guy. It's maybe not a punch the air kind of moment, but it's a quiet, yeah, that's who the Doctor is, even as a simulation. Even when he's not real, he's doing some good work. So throw on top the design of the monks themselves, and I was watching this thinking, are the next 2 episodes really as bad as I thought? Because this was quite all right. I throw a 7 out of 10 at it.
Yeah, I will say that the scenes of Nardole and Bill particularly discovering that they're not real are really, really good, and some of the best work both those actors and actresses did in the season. That was some really good stuff. I agree, there's some cool stuff in there. I just didn't think there was 45 minutes of cool stuff in there.
Fair enough. I'll continue with Pyramid at the End of the World and say I was a bit struck dumb by this episode, similar to watching Knock Knock. I was like, yes, okay, yes, that's fine. And it wasn't jumping out as some egregious, oh my God, Doctor Who's just fallen off a cliff in quality, which is what my mind has built it up to be since 2017. Sure, there are bits that are dumb. The whole Doctor as president of the world thing, it's just stupid. You can pull off this exact story in exactly the same way without him having that role. So I just find it dumb. And the military people who are making all the decisions, not just for their countries, but the entire planet, seemingly without even checking in with their governments. Who are these people? I mean, the Russian bloke in particular is just out there in the middle of nowhere with a tent when they pick him up. Yet he's the most important Russian decision maker. I mean, what? Meanwhile, the whole virus plot post-COVID hits in a way I wouldn't have felt at all back in 2017. That felt a bit extraordinary. I have no idea what the monks actually want, though, when I'm watching this, but this episode did land better than I thought, and I'd give it a 6 out of 10. So I stepped down from the previous episode, but a 6.
Yeah, I thought this was a step up from the previous episode. So we're diverging there again. I think this is a really good example where things that would have absolutely annoyed me and taken me out of the story on the first watch, I can kind of set aside on the second watch. So all the stuff you noted about the President of Earth and who are these generals making these decisions, you watch it the first time and go, what's going on here? That's nonsense. That's just picky. And suddenly you're annoyed and you're sort of taken out of the episode. Whereas now I can sort of go, look, that's just Moffat's geopolitics. He's hopeless at that. Move along. I can kind of put that aside and just go, that's just Moffat, and enjoy the plot for what it was. And I actually think the plot here was pretty good. I again think that there wasn't 45 minutes. And as I said, I think this would work better if It and Extremis were merged into sort of one 50-minute episode. I'd forgotten how much we see of the monks in this, and they're really, really good. They're really, really creepy. At this stage, them having no known agenda or reason or rationale works because we're still wondering what's going on, and there's still a mystery. Bill's desperation is really good, but the gas virus plot, whatever you want to call that, I was really taken in by that this time. I thought that was really, really strong. And that helped to keep this episode together. So if I called Extremis a C+, I'm calling Pyramid at the End of the World a B.
Wow. Well, why don't you take us on home with the third part?
The Lie of the Land. I can remember watching this in a hotel room in New York City.
Yeah.
And being not particularly taken with it. And I've watched it this time and no, it's not good.
Right, yeah.
I've said that the first 2 Monk Trilogy episodes were better than I remembered, particularly Pyramid. This is bad. This is just not good. It doesn't work. The plot just makes no sense. The Doctor is a complete dick for no reason other than, hey, wouldn't it be funny for the Doctor to be a bit of a dick? Bill sort of gets to wander around, not really having anything to do. I think that Bill really sort of lacks an important role in the plot up until the last minute when she just gets to be the Deus Ex Machina. And the whole thing about the Conquered Earth, the opening's good. The thing about the Doctor convincing us that the monks have been here since we first got out of the slime, I was going, oh, that's a really cool concept. Maybe this one's going to be better than I thought it was. No, it just goes off a cliff after the first 5 minutes. I don't know what the monks want. I don't know why we care about the monks. Okay, they seem to be sort of bastards, but why? All it needed was a few lines about they are intergalactic leeches who suck the life force of others, so every time a human sent to the gulag, they're secretly turned into monk food. I don't know, something. Their planets died, so they need a new one, or they just moved from planet, they're like, I don't care, but give us something. Yeah. So I thought this was a bit of a hot mess from start to finish. I'm giving it a D+.
Yeah, very fair. As expected, this one was a step down again from the other two for me. It still wasn't quite as egregious as I'd built it up to be since 2017, I will say that much. And there were moments playing out where I was fine with it. But there's also elements in it like, the monks make you live like it's Soviet Russia in blue boiler suits. Why? That's one of my notes.
Yeah, because that's what fascists do, Rob.
Oh, I see. Some people seem to remember the monks aren't the real deal. What causes that? Never explained. Everyone seems to be brainwashed except certain people. Why?
Yeah, and there's a really cool idea that they could have run with there.
Yeah. And look, what happened to the monk who was on the ship with the Doctor? It's revealed that the Doctor's been playing a game all along. There was a monk on that ship. Where's he gone? Why does the Doctor crash the ship into England laughing like an idiot? Especially when we know some of those dock workers, like the ones who helped Bill and Nardole get onto the ship in the first place, they're good guys. They know monks aren't the real deal. Why are we crashing a ship into where they work? I'm still not clear what the monks want either, Dave. And most annoying of all, I think it has a really rushed ending. The monks are just built up in the past two episodes, but are hardly in this episode. They hardly do anything. And then they just run off. It's a real... what's all that about episode, which I think fans of The Late Show will recognise. And as a conclusion to a three-parter, it's really unforgivable on some levels for that. So for a score, I can't give it any more than a 5 out of 10. And even that feels generous.
It's funny, Rob, as you were speaking about that, I was reminded of the new episode of The Grand Tour, which dropped a few days ago, Sad Job. Through that, there's a running joke from Clarkson, May and Hammond that Mr. Willman, the producer, would quite like it if we could find a way for the tanker to accidentally blow up. Oh, why? Because it'll look good in the trailer. And as you were describing all those things, I thought, why does the ship run into England? Why is the Doctor laughing? Why does the Doctor regenerate? I just thought, because it looks good in the trailer. I've got no other explanation.
And that's just really crap. It's just really crap.
It is, and in a season that we're really enjoying, this was just bad.
Agree. Completely agree. Empress of Mars. Another episode where I thought my feelings were previously quite mixed, and pretty much that was the case when I rewatched it. The premise of this is interesting to me, Dave, as the idea of Victorians in space was the basis for the Space 1889 role-playing game back in the late 80s and the early 90s that I played, I loved. And I also had the video game version of, so anyone thinking, gosh, what an original idea this was. No. People have been putting Victorians in space for decades, even in just the modern sense, let alone if we think back to the 1860s and Jules Verne firing people off into space and things like this. So the premise I could live with easily. It's been well done in fiction. But while the Godsacre deserter plot is really well done, and I think that actor really sells it, the Catchlove plot just seems too moustache-twirling villain. It doesn't ring true for me at all, and sidelining Nardole is done in a very cheap way. We don't even get an explanation for why the TARDIS leaves, except off-screen we know that Gatiss mustn't have wanted to have Matt Lucas in the mix, so he just sort of writes him out of it, gives him a scene with Missy, and that's about it. Alpha Centauri appearing at the end is a nice touch, but overall it doesn't fire properly, and that's frustrating because I think it's a case of some interesting ingredients, but they're just not mixed together well, so I can't go past 6 out of 10 for this.
Yeah, we watched this for our Mark Gatiss episode last year, and I commented at the time that it was one of my favourite Gatiss episodes, and I think watching it again in the context of Series 10 rather than a run of Gaddis episodes, it goes up even more. I think this is the one that gets the series back to a really strong position. We had a lot of really good episodes at the opening. The Monk trilogy, better than I remembered, apart from the last one. But it's a dip in the middle. And now I thought we're back to just a good, solid adventure. It's got a good premise. It's got a decent plot. It's got cool Ice Warriors. It's got the Ice Warrior Queen thing. It's got Alpha Centauri. It's got gun battles. It's got the Doctor lecturing people. It's what I want in Doctor Who. It's a good, solid Doctor Who story. It's a straightforward B for me. Not a classic, easily watchable, a good adventure in space and time.
Yeah, fair enough. And as you were talking then, I was thinking, have I been too harsh? Could I have given it a 7 instead? Maybe it was a 7, but I said 6.
And before we go on to the next episode, Rob, I think this is a good point to just talk a little bit about Missy and Nardole, because again, my take was a bit different watching this compared to 7 years ago. Because 7 years ago, we were, of course, doing the whole, what's in the vault? Who's in the vault? Is it Missy? What's going on? Why is it? Etc., etc. And you sort of got that teasing out of it, whereas here, you know that she's in the vault. And I do think it works better knowing that from the start and sort of seeing the way the Doctor reacts, seeing the way Nardole reacts. And actually, I found that build-up with the vault was a lot better, knowing what was coming. I really enjoyed watching that, knowing the final picture on the box of the puzzle, so to speak. So that was really good. And as I've said before, I enjoy Missy a lot more as she goes on. And certainly that was my case in the watch here. I'll talk more about that in a couple of episodes' time. Nardole, again, I was sitting there trying to put into words what I thought about Nardole after sort of episode 3 or 4. And I think I found myself using exactly the phrase that I used in the hot take, which is that I get the feeling that they've got Matt Lucas and gone, he's a funny guy, and he's got a bit of a light comic relief character. Let's make sure we always give him funny lines. I mean, the first half of the season, I did sort of have this, oh my God, that feels so forced. Yes, we know he's Matt Lucas. Yes, we know he's a comedian, but he doesn't have to be funny all the time. Stop trying. But watching the evolution of Nardole, and by this point going, actually, he's a real character now, I really enjoyed, and he came good by about halfway.
Yeah, and was it one of the Monk episodes where he had to take Bill to task, and he actually turns very, very, very serious?
Yes.
Which then leads to her saying, Nardole, are you secretly a badass?
Yes.
I quite enjoyed that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I just wanted to make a comment of that before we dive into the back end of the season.
Well, take us into the Eaters of Light, Dave.
Rob?
Yes?
I enjoyed this episode so much. I loved it last time. Everybody's been telling me I was wrong. It's not that great. For 7 years they've been telling me that. And I went in thinking, it's going to be rose-tinted glasses, isn't it? I'm going to suddenly see what everyone else is seeing and realise it's not that. No, this is great. Capaldi is great. Bill is great. The ideas are great. The location filming is great. The tone is great. The music's great. I love this episode so much. It was a joy to watch. All the elements worked. No notes. It's an A from me.
Wow. Okay. I knew this was an episode I liked at the time, but in my memory, fandom didn't think much of it. So that dovetails with what you're saying, if you've been having to defend it or being told you're wrong. Because I felt that fandom didn't think much of it. And over the years, I've commented, I think it's a good one, and the responses have been muted to me as well. On rewatch, I was just as happy with it again as I remember being with it on broadcast. I think the setting, again, as you say, is really good in general. It also feels like a classic era story in some ways, like when Pat and his crews would land in some field somewhere and march off to meet the locals. It feels like a Troughton story, and the whole Ninth Legion mystery is so flexible. It can be shoehorned in and not feel out of place. The Romans aren't stereotypical Romans either, which is a nice twist would be the wrong word. It's a nice vibe, the way the Romans are portrayed. And I think this is a genuine step up from the week before. I don't think it's some sort of hidden classic. I'm not going to give it an A, but it's solid for sure. And I don't know why it doesn't get more love than it does. It's great Doctor Who. I think you're agreeing with me here that it's the Doctor, Bill and Nardole having a fun adventure in a historical period. What's not to love? It's an 8 out of 10 for me.
yeah, I have nothing else to say. I just really enjoyed it.
Fair enough. I'll take us through to World Enough and Time. And gosh, wasn't this a world changer? It was a world changer then, and it's a world changer now when I rewatch it. And this, as I said at the start, I have rewatched several times over the years, so I've seen this a fair bit. There's a bit of silliness at the start, I'll agree, with Missy playing very low and loose with the name Doctor Who, which felt a bit cringe at the time, and I can watch it and accept it now. It doesn't push all the wrong buttons, which I think was Moffat's intent. I think he's a troll par excellence. You know, he knows exactly what will piss off fans, and he seems to delight in doing it from time to time. But now I rewatch it, I think, yeah, meh, whatever. So in the end, you don't win with this stuff, Stephen. But moving on, I mean, wow. Anyone who's a fan of Spare Parts will recognise this kind of setting. Bill getting a hole blown through her chest is no joke. And we see the cyber hospital and all of that. It's so grim. It's so dark. I said at the time, I remember this vividly, saying at the time it reminded me of World War I hospitals, where guys would have just the most horrid injuries. Like they've lost half their face, but they'd still be alive. And oh, God. This is really great Doctor Who. I don't think I've met anyone who's ever been down on this episode, which for a show like Doctor Who is very, very rare. There are always contrarians. A solid 9 out of 10 here.
I also went into this one remembering it as being very good. I think I gave it a 10 out of 10 when we did our hot take review. And again, a little bit worried that maybe it wouldn't be quite as good on the second watch. But my God, is it good. It absolutely just hooked me in from the start. I agree, yes, Moffat is being a little bit trolly there. And I agree with you, as I said about some of his antics a couple of episodes ago. You sort of go, yeah, okay, Moffat, yeah, we get it. You're being a bit of a troll. Move aside. And you can just put that aside so much more easily now when you're looking back on it with the passing of time. So I didn't mind all that. I do think this is as good as Michelle Gomez gets, these 2 episodes. I'm not a fan of Missy. I'm not a fan of her performance. It's a little bit too knowing and arch for me, but in this 2-parter, she gets it right for me, and I really love that. But from the moment Bill gets shot in the chest, you're absolutely hooked. You don't know what's going to happen next, and the Doctor doesn't know what's going to happen next, and you really feel that tension ratcheting up right from that moment. I'd forgotten all of those little asides that happened, all the little flashbacks to the conversations and what was going on, and Bill saying, no, you can't trust Missy, don't do this, what if I die? And that is built up really, really well. You see Moffat's ability as a script writer to put together a non-linear plot like that and build up the tension is really, really good. This is some of his, if not his best writing for the show, in my opinion. And it's just bleak, and it's depressing, and it's scary, and it's emotional. And even when you know, as we do watching it again, that Bill ends up being cyber converted, there's still a part of you going, no, I don't know, but they're not going to do it. No, stop. Just really, really, you feel that moment. It's got one of the, if not the best cliffhangers in the whole new series, the I Waited For You, as the tear comes out of the Cyberman's eye. That's just spectacular. And Capaldi playing a doctor who's scared and who's worried and who doesn't know what's happening next is just extraordinarily good. At its premise, it's got one of the best sci-fi ideas Moffat's done, with the ship coming out of the black hole and the time distillation effect. It's so good. I'm giving it an A+. It was 10 out of 10 7 years ago. It's A+ now. It's just extraordinary.
Oh, that's big shoes to fill. Tell us what you think about the follow-up to it.
I remember being a little bit, not disappointed with the follow-up, because I think it's really good, but feeling at the time it didn't quite live up to expectations or to the setup. But no, this, I think, continues the vibe just as well. And I think last time, knowing this was a not quite a regeneration story, I was kind of looking for the pieces and kind of working out where it was all going to go, and instead just being able to go, look, I know where this ends up, so I'm just going to enjoy the journey. I found that journey was fantastic. It was better than I remembered, and I remembered it being pretty good. John Sim and Michelle Gomez together are just extraordinarily good. I think it's John Sim's best performance in Doctor Who, and by some some mile. I think it's Matt Lucas's best performance in the series, and by some margin. Bill is absolutely extraordinarily good in her performance, but it feels like a proper end-of-season epic. I think it's the only one of Moffat's end-of-season epics that really feels like that for me. But more than anything, I felt like this was one of those classic era regeneration stories where you just watch everything become too much for the Doctor and fall out of the Doctor's control. And the stuff where Capaldi's saying as the Doctor, I've got hours to live, I don't care, we're having this out and then we're saving everybody. I just thought that's so good, and he does it so well. I have some thoughts on the ending, but I'll stop gushing, Rob, and let you have a few words.
Well, in the modern era, Dave, it's been very common for the second part of a two-parter to not quite deliver or be tricksy and go off on a different tangent and never quite work out. And of course, some two-parters do work out. Human nature, family of blood remains a touchstone for many, so I don't pretend they don't always work out. This, however, is in the vein of the stories that go off in a different direction, and it still works. We have this pastoral, green, homestead on the range kind of vibe, which comes as such a shock when the episode starts, because we've been in this dirty old town in the previous episode, smokestacks and all that, and suddenly we're out in what looks like nature, the countryside.
Yeah, and especially watching them back to back rather than a week apart.
Exactly. But there is this sense of impending doom. The Cybermen are coming. You've got the two masters. You do have that speech with the Doctor having it out with the Master and Missy. Will they stand with the Doctor? And all the while, Bill is a classic Cyberman. Like, a companion has been properly cyber converted, and it's not a misdirect. It really happened. It's all just amazing, Dave. And then through to that final showdown, the Doctor's stuffed, Bill's carrying him. This is terrible radio, Dave, but I got my hands out in front of me like I'm carrying someone. Bill's carrying him. That imagery is amazing. The big save from the spaceship oil at the very end is a little annoying to me, and the gravitas of Bill dying is sort of stripped away, as once again Moffat can't let one of his creations just die. It's a bit, wait a minute, didn't we let dead Clara fly off with Lady Me at the end of the previous series, and now we're doing that again with these two women? Why? Why can't this be a bit different? But really, that's pretty much my only beef with the story, and it's not enough to get upset about. I think this is a genuine 10 out of 10 moment in Doctor Who. I bloody love it.
I'm also giving it an A+. Last time my mark was a little bit lower than World Enough in Time, but I think they're both back-to-back A+, and Falling Eaters of Light as an A. So the series is really ending on a high. But you mentioned the World War I hospital feeling of the first part of this.
Yes.
And the feeling of the Doctor dying, in effect, in a just devastated battlefield.
Yeah.
That is, again, just that World War I imagery. And we've spoken about it many times before, Rob, but it needs to be said again. The image of the Doctor dying, everything's got just too big for him. He saved who he can. You're still not quite sure he saved the day. You're not sure if we'll ever see Nardole again or if he'll get out of this alive. Bill has effectively died. And just that moment of I'd wanted there to be stars. I'd hoped there'd be stars. That was just, I'm not a guy who really gets hit in the feels that easily, but that hit me in the feels. And that depth of feeling was enough to get me by the puddle coming and picking up Bill. I was sort of like, that's fine. I'm so invested in this that I can live with that this time. Yeah, it's just spectacular.
Yeah. Again, the egregious part for me with the space paddle isn't that it showed up, because, we saw it back in the first episode. It is genuinely set up.
Yes.
To be there and to be in love with Bill and following Bill around and all of that. It's just that we had done it the previous season and had a dead companion fly off with another woman. And it just felt like we were just retreading that same ground. That's what really got me about it.
Yeah, and that is a very nice segue into sort of my overall thoughts. As long-time listeners will know, I'm not a particular fan of the Matt Smith era. In fact, I don't like it much at all. And often that sort of means I get tainted with sort of being anti-Moffat, whereas I've said 50% of what he wrote for RTD I think is fantastic. A number of episodes he wrote as his own showrunner are very good. I haven't really sort of liked what I find frankly smug, pretentious, sort of overcomplicated arcs that just don't land. And watching this series, particularly the finale, I realised that when you like Moffat's characters and you're invested in Moffat's characters, his writing is incredibly impactful. Now, I don't particularly like Amy and I can't stand Clara, and I don't like the 11th Doctor. So where others might watch them and go, I felt, kicked in the feels when they left, I was like, I don't care. But because I do love Capaldi and the 12th Doctor, because I do love Pearl Mackie as Bill Potts, and because I've really enjoyed this season, and even come to like Nardole and come to like Missy over the course of this series, who would have thought that would happen? Suddenly, I'm going, I get it now. I get what all these Moffat fans are talking about every series. It's now landed for me because I love these characters so much. And I think that, as we all know, this is the year that Moffat didn't want to do. He kind of had to do it to bridge the gap between him and Chibnall. And him just going, let's just write some episodes, get some writers in, write some episodes, and then write a big finale, is the best of Moffat. I think it lacks pretentiousness. It lacks fan wankery. And it's just fun. As I said, I was a very happy Doctor Who fan watching this series and going, I'm glad I watched this show. This is a good show. This is absolutely one of the best seasons of the new series for me. Absolutely top couple. And World Enough in Time, The Doctor Falls is incredible. And I don't think we can wax enough about how good it seems we both found that.
Yeah, well, I've long felt that this is Capaldi's best season, both from a story point of view and the way he's actually playing the Doctor. He's still cranky, he can still get mad with people, but there's a more fun angle to him as well. It's like they finally got the mix right. And maybe that was the plan all along, and maybe Moffat's patting himself on the back that he's taken the Doctor from A to B, and we've seen growth in the character. And I just think, bollocks to all that. You should have had him start off like this, unless a Doctor is going to do a Tom and hang around for 7 years or something, trying to do some clever, look at the way he's changed sort of storyline feels a bit rushed and pointless over the space of only a few seasons. But I digress. On rewatch, I liked most things the same, which is to say I rated most of the season pretty well to begin with in my memory. And a couple of the episodes stood out as being better. I mean, Knock Knock did slightly better, and Pyramid at the End of the World I didn't dislike as much. So all up, I feel this remains Capaldi's best season, easily. I like it a little more than I used to, and I'm really glad we did this rewatch, Dave. That's me done.
Yeah, it is the season where Capaldi gets to be the star of Doctor Who.
Yes.
He's not playing second fiddle to Clara, who's the most important, wonderful thing ever to happen, and, this story is so much about Clara that we can even put her in the credits.
Yeah.
Like, not that I'm saying you can't have strong companions, I'm not saying that, but there's something about the Doctor showing a companion in the universe that just works.
Yeah.
And giving Capaldi the chance to do that, to be the wise Doctor, to be the alien Doctor, to be what we consider the Doctor to be, just seeing him do that, and such a extraordinarily good actor. I've really appreciated watching him this time. How good an actor he is. I think this is just the formula that Moffat perhaps stumbled on by accident, and it's given us his best work.
Yeah, and tying us back into the discussion about Millie Gibson at the start of the episode here, there were conversations around the time that maybe Capaldi wasn't leaving Doctor Who on the best of terms and all of that. Do you remember those discussions that fans were having? I
think it was certainly around, but I always took it more as the I'm exhausted, not I don't like the show.
Yeah, it just made me think back to those times and those conversations, and I was watching it thinking, I really hope that's not true, or at least is somehow a little different, because what a shame. He was doing so well here, and he's obviously such a big fan of the show. I know he doesn't want to come back to it, but gosh, what a great Doctor we had there for a while.
Yeah, fantastic Doctor. Lots of great episodes. I agree. As I said, I went into this episode thinking, oh, I don't want to watch these ones again. I've just watched them, but boy, did I enjoy it.
Yeah. Shall we wrap it up?
We should wrap it up.
Alrighty. Let's move into what we've been watching. I've been watching...